Yeah, I'm going back actually, speaking of the Queen, back to the time of Queen Victoria. Um, and it was because of the first of the line. My very first Grubb lens that I bought, I didn't realize at the time was an unusual one in that it had helical focus. I suppose helical focus is focused with a helicoid. I think helical is the process and helicoid is the thing. And it actually dates from 1858. And it looks like this. We take helicoids for granted these days in lens. That's how most of the lenses that we have today are actually focused. But back in the 1850s, there are many different focus mechanisms. And by the way, in anything I ever present here, I'm always delighted if somebody comes along and says, you're wrong, there's another one, or you left one out. So the purpose behind this is to show this. The first one was with a sliding box. That's where one box fits inside another. And the lens doesn't need a focus mechanism. It's focused by the movement of the box. The most common one, well, what became the most common one, is the use of bellows, in which the lens moved backwards and forwards by means of a bellows. Then there was the rack and pinion sliding tube, which is common from, I think, the late 1840s. Again, people can correct me on this with the Petzval lens. This lens, which I'm showing you here, was made in Dublin by Thomas Grubb, but Grubb at the time was also making Petzval lenses and was familiar with the rack and pinion sliding tube. The next method, which I've seen on some brass lenses, where there's just a simple sliding tube inside in the lens. And then there was the helicoid, which I think was very uncommon at the time. So when I'm going to go on into this is going to be difficult to read, so I'll read it out for you. This is Thomas Grubb's letter in July the 14th, 1858, to the Photographic Journal. And he says, I'll read out what he says. Sir, the sketch enclosed represents a section of a mounting I lately devised for stereoscopic lenses, he says. I should observe that that part of the inner tube which finishes of the same diameter as the outer one is supplied with a coarse graduation. This construction is less costly and much less liable to accident than the rack and pinion one, quite as effective, and affords the means, having adjusted one camera to focus, to adjust the other one by the graduated part. The rest of his letter to the editor of the Photographic Journal from July 1858 is actually about a stereo, which is beyond the scope of what I'm talking here. So here's some examples of Grubb stereo lenses from around the same period. There's one, there's another one. So he made a few, and he also made them not just for stereo, but for, sorry, I should really be in the slideshow. Not just for stereo, but also for general photographic purposes with his aplanatic lens. He also made what he called a portable mount. And there's a Grubb D lens, which is quite a large and very heavy lens. And there's a small Grubb AX lens, which had the portable mount. This had a sliding tube in it. But the purpose of this was to move in and out the stop, which was put in here by means of a washer. This also had a washer stop, but this had the means of focus through a helicoid. Here's a larger group of Grubb lenses, and this is my collection minus my aluminium one. And here you'll see that the only example I have is this number 509, the one on the left. It's from around mid-1858, and here's the washers, and the majority of them were sold as portable lenses. Now, in his advertisements, again, this is difficult to read, but the first two sizes, A and B, were available either in Grubb's portable, non-adjusting or screw adjusting mount. So he only made them for the smaller lenses. He did not make screw mounts for the larger lenses because they would have been very big and very heavy. In fact, the screw mount Grubbs are actually heavier for their size than the portable mount ones. So what was the opposition doing? Well, Ross, around the same time, with his orthographic lenses, was selling them with the following mounts: sliding tube no, sorry, the first one I should start with rigid setting, sliding tube adjustment, and sliding tube with rack and pinion, which would have meant they were a Petzval style type lens. So the screw mount wasn't common at the time, as you see on this group of lenses. I know Ross produced a lot of lenses. He wasn't offering a screw mount at the time. Now, the thing is here, again, I'd taken this photograph earlier just to show you what size the lens is by comparison, let's say, to a modern Leica lens. That's a Leica 35 Summicron. The issue here, though, is that I'm not aware of helicoid focus being used on a wide scale before Max Barex designed the Anastigmat, and then the Elmax, and then the Elmar for the early Leicas, which became commonly available from 1925 onwards. Now, I'd be delighted if somebody could contradict me on this. But the important thing is, because this leads on to the questions which I have going to raise, and if anyone has a comment. I'm showing examples of photographic lenses with helicoids between 1850 and 1920s. I'd like to find out, does anyone know of an example, let's say from 1890 or 1905 or 1915 with a helicoid? The other thing I'd like to know is other examples from the 1850s. I think there were some French lenses that I've seen from the 1850s, 1860s, which had helicoids. And then I suppose the next question is, what held up the helicoid? It's now so commonplace we don't think anything of it. Was it the size of the lens that the helicoid produced? Was it the camera size? Was it the plate or film size? Was it, for example, and this is possibly true, easier to make cameras with focus outside of the lens? In other words, the lens itself didn't focus, but the camera focused. And were there other issues? So I'd be delighted if anyone has any comments about this. I can show you what size the lens is by holding it up. I can come out of screen share, but if anyone has any comments on this, stop sharing. Yeah. So here is the, you can see it here. So can you see that, folks? Jim?
Yeah, sorry, can you lift it up slightly, William? That's better. Right. Yeah, quite a size, aren't we?
It's a large thing,
yeah.
And it is heavy holding it up like this.
Oh, that is.
So just, has anyone any comments on that, about what happened to screw mount lenses between 1858 and 1925? Even in the 30s, there was, as you saw from my previous presentation, there was a lot of bellows lenses on, you know, for example, the Retina had a bellow lens. So it's just fascinating. I mean, and he wrote to the Photographic Journal, so other people knew that he was producing a lens with it, but he quickly dropped it. Most of his lenses, by far the greatest majority of his lenses, were actually the portable mount, like the other two ones that I showed you. So anyway, I'd be delighted if anyone has afterwards any thoughts about this. Oh, there is a lens from, maybe if John Wade has one in his big collection there. Here's one from 1890 with a helicoid in it, but I'm not aware of one much before the Leica in the mid-1920s.